public meeting is now called to order at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, May 1st. This meeting is being held as required by the provisions of the Chapter 131, Section 40 of the General Laws of the Commonwealth. An act relative to the protection of the wetlands is most recently amended. Notice of the time and place of this meeting was posted in the town clerk's office, also the town hall. Persons wishing to be heard will be called in the following order. We are having a meeting remotely tonight via Zoom, and it's also being recorded for future viewing pleasure. We have one item on the agenda. It's a discussion of farmland of local importance designation. Al Albrell's here, certified professional soil scientist, American Farmland Trust. Review of matters presented. Votes may be taken. Al, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thanks, folks. I'm sorry to hear about the person who's stuck in Connecticut. That sounds like the name of a horror film or something. So, stuck in Connecticut. I also have to remember that I'm being recorded here, so maybe I shouldn't be too flip. Anyway, Ryan, thank you. By way of introduction, I worked for the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service for about 40 years. And if you're not, are you familiar with NRCS, folks? Anybody here? I'm talking to a conservation commission, not an agricultural commission. So
correct. I see the stickers, the bumper stickers.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, the AFT, you'll see American Farmland Trust, no farm, no food. You'll see a lot of that.
Right.
Maybe I should just go ahead and do a screen share here, and hopefully everybody will be able to see this. Let me know when you can see this thing pop up.
I can see it.
Right. Okay, so I work for this agency called the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service. I worked in soils. I did soil mapping, soil survey work. And so some conservation commission folks might be familiar with that because it's kind of the soil survey mapping can be a first cut as to identifying wetlands. Those soils that are mapped as very poorly drained soils or poorly drained soils are often associated with or analogous to wetlands. But I was one of the people who walked across the landscapes and drew these squiggly lines on aerial photographs delineating out the different soil types. And I eventually acceded to being kicked up to where I was before my retirement. I was the state soil scientist for the USDA's NRCS in Massachusetts. And I got involved in helping people understand soils information and in a lot of cases how it applies to assessing the suitability of land for agriculture, for crop production. And from that came this initiative to work with towns to recognize what we call farmland of local importance soils. And Ryan and all you folks, thank you for taking the time during this meeting to let me talk to you about this. I'll try to get through this pretty quickly. It's fortunate you don't have a lot on other stuff on your agenda. No one's put in a notice of intent or whatever. So I guess I caught you at a good evening. So thank you very much. So what this is about is trying to recognize these additional lands that are suited for agriculture, and I'll try to get into that. So why are we doing this? I should add that when I retired from the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, the last things that I did was help to establish farmland of local importance in the town of Hatfield. And at that point, the state conservationist, who was my boss, said, we need to keep doing this. And the reason for that is that the more important farmland soils that are recognized, the greater the chances of more eligibility for the NRCS's preservation program funding. And I'll explain that a little bit more. So anyway, without trying to make a short story long here, the state conservationist said, I'm going to get some soft money and we're going to continue this initiative and I'm going to find somebody to do it. And I said, well, I guess it might as well be me. So I've been involved with this for, well, this is going on 4 years now since I retired. I worked for NRCS for 40 years, and here I am still doing this. I'm not really getting to understand what the retirement part of semi-retirement is, I guess. But it's been a pretty good thing. So I guess I'll continue to do it for a while. Anyway, the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service is funding this initiative. It's giving the money to the American Farmland Trust, and I'm working as an independent contractor, and I send my invoices to AFT. So it's still all coming from federal funding. And so what the NRCS does predominantly is work with producers, work with farmers to help implement conservation practices such as manure storage facilities, managing roof runoff on heavy use areas, these kinds of things. But one of the programs it has is this thing called the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program. And under that is the Agricultural Land Easement Program. So you might hear people talk about ASEP-ALE. So I'll just refer to ALE, the Agricultural Land Easement. And if you like beer, I guess you can relate to that. So what this does is it provides 50% of the funding to a farmland owner who is paid the market value of the land less the agricultural value in exchange for a promise to maintain the agricultural capacity of the land. In a nutshell, it's a farmland preservation program. The incentive to the landowner is that if he or she wants to keep the land preserved for agriculture, they get the monetary value of the land, as opposed to maybe faced with a choice of seeing the land developed or selling it off for subdivisions or what have you. So it provides the landowner a viable choice, and landowner gets some capital and can do improvements on the land or whatever they decide to do with it. But ALE's a partnership program. You folks may have heard of APR, the Agricultural Preservation Restriction Program. That's a state program. The state of Massachusetts Department of Ag Resources manages that program. It's the predominant partner with NRCS for farmland preservation. Typically, Mass Department of Ag Resources will provide 50% of the funding, and NRCS matches it. But it doesn't have to be the Mass Department of Agricultural Resources. Land trusts can partner with NRCS. Towns can partner with NRCS. So I guess I told you all that just to summarize this. It's a program to help preserve farmland. So if the town of Acushnet, values that, this is something you might want to support. And if you don't value that, you should just tell me right now. So this ALE funding eligibility is based in part on soils, and you might recognize the outline here and of this map. So the idea is that if you're spending taxpayer dollars, you want to invest it in soils that are suitable for crop production. So how do you know that? Well, you go to this soil survey information. So these are the soil survey map delineations for the town of Acushnet. And so, as I said before, I was one of the people who was involved with making these maps. I was the soil survey project leader for Franklin County, Massachusetts, and for Middlesex County, Mass. And I got into southeastern Mass a little bit too when we were doing the soil survey of Plymouth County. I did quality assurance on that. So anyway, the soil survey consists of soil maps. There's all kinds of information about the soil properties, and there's interpretations for land use. And that's where this whole idea of using the soils information to determine what the suitability for crop production is. And this is public information. If you Google web soil survey, this is the first thing that's going to pop up. You can enter in your home address, if you like, into the soil survey. web soil survey, and it'll bring it up on an aerial image, and you can outline your area of interest, and you can produce a map, and you can produce all kinds of reports and so forth. It's really an inventory of the nation's soil resources is what the soil survey is, and it's done nationwide. It's available throughout all of Massachusetts. So you can run this report and you can get the farmland classification, and it's color coded, as you can see. And the green is prime farmland, and the lighter blue is farmland of statewide importance. And everything else gets lumped into not prime farmland. But there are areas that are good for crop production that the soil survey doesn't catch. And this farmland of local importance is a workaround for that. And if those additional areas are recognized, then in a nutshell, the more important soils that are recognized, the greater the chance is that a particular parcel of land will be eligible for the AL funding, because there's a criteria involved. The parcel must consist of at least 50% important farmland soils, and it all counts the same. The prime farmland soils, the farmland of statewide importance, and farmland of local importance all count the same toward the 50%. This is why NRCS is funding this, to try to recognize these additional lands that are suited for crop production. This is an actual outline of a parcel in the town of Acushnet, and you can see that most of it's red, right? The soil is classed as farmland of or not prime farmland. Then there's some prime farmland here, but a lot of it is not yet. You can see that this is we can see by looking at aerial imagery that this is good for hay production. It's being used for hay production. So this particular soil type, where it's suited for crop production, can be listed and recognized as farmland of local importance. So that's why I'm being asked to work with towns to do this. So in this particular example, if farmland of local importance were to be recognized, this particular parcel's important farmland soils extent would increase from about 20% to about 56%. And that would render this eligible for the soils criteria part of the funding in this particular example. So what is farmland of local importance? This comes from the Code of Federal Regulations. It's a federal program. NRCS has to adhere to the Code of Federal Regulations. So within the code, there's all these definitions of prime farmland, farmland of statewide importance. And there's just a little blurb about farmland of local importance. And to paraphrase it, it's simply areas of additional lands. That means in addition to those lands or those soils that have national or statewide importance, which means prime farmland or farmland of statewide importance. But in addition to those soils, these areas are important for the production of a crop, a food, feed, fiber, forage, or oilseed crop. But here's the kicker. NRCS can't recognize these additional areas on its own because the Code of Federal Regulations states that the lands are to be identified by the local agency or agencies concerned. And that's why I'm talking to you folks right now, because even I do all the work, I identify the soil types, but NRCS has to have a local partner to sign off on it, to make it official. So what it is it's this list of these soil types that are not classed as important farmland soils, but they have evidence of suitability for crop production, at least in some places where they're mapped. So if they're acknowledged officially, then they can be considered for the agricultural land easement program funding. Pretty straightforward, I think. So why we're doing this, I guess I'm kind of repeating myself here, but the bottom line is if these additional soils are recognized and there's more potential for farmland preservation funding eligibility. It also provides a choice to the farmland owner. And of course, the idea behind these programs is to help maintain the nation's agricultural capacity into the future. And if the town is interested in things like rural character or preserving open space, this is a way to do this. This is another example of an area in Acushnet. These are cranberry bogs, but they're not recognized as important farmland soils, and that farmland level importance could catch those areas. So how is it done? If firstly, if I have assurance that the town will sign off on the work, then I'll review the soil mapping throughout the town. I'll do all this remotely. I look at the aerial imagery, the historic imagery going back to about 1985, and I look for evidence of crop production on these soils that are mapped as not important farmland soils. Once in a while, I can't tell if a field is hayed or maybe it's just brush hog for wildlife management purposes, and sometimes I have to ask, for local knowledge, but that's pretty rare. Then I just list the soil types, and it goes onto a document, one or two page document. This is an example from the town of Barry. And you'll see that there's this preamble that reflects what's stated in the Code of Federal Regulations. And it shows basically these are the soil types that I saw evidence of crop production that are not mapped as important farmland soil. And then there's qualifiers attached to each one. And the reason there are these qualifiers is typically, just look at, for an example, typically where this particular soil type is mapped throughout Barry, it's extremely stony. It's limited. You know how, well, in Acushnet, it's not as bad as in other parts of the state, but we have got some pretty stony soils, and it's pretty typical throughout a lot of the areas that that's the case. But there are places where they're not so stony and they can be used for agriculture. But we want to be able to separate out those areas that are mapped that are good for agriculture from those areas that are not. So that's what these qualifiers do. They also ensure that people aren't going to drain wetlands in order to.
Recording in progress.
Yep. Did everybody hear that echo, or is it just me?
Yes.
It's his computer, sorry.
That was cool. So,
I don't know. What the fuck?
that sounds like if someone mutes, that'll probably make the difference. So anyway,
Am I there still?
Yeah, you hear.
yeah,
What's going on with my? Oh my goodness. All right. Sorry, everybody.
that's all right. The one that kind of happened to me one time where I actually had two versions of the Zoom meeting at the same time, and it was sort of looping on itself.
Yeah, it wouldn't let me on, and then it just connected everything.
There you go. Now you're, yeah. So getting back to the qualifying conditions again, if a soil formed under naturally wet conditions, but it was drained historically for agriculture, it gets grandfathered in. But we don't want to encourage people to drain wetlands in order to qualify for this. So we've got this qualifier: we're historically drained, etc. So that's what those are about. And then there's a signatory section here, and there's two folks that sign off on this. And that's Dan Wright, who's the state conservationist for NRCS in Massachusetts. And in the case of Barry, it was the chair of the Conservation Commission. And that's all. That's what NRCS is asking of the town, is a signatory to sign off on this to make it official. The designations are, a copy is loaded onto what's called the NRCS Field Office Technical Guide, where it's there, it's stored, it's publicly available, and NRCS will refer to it when a Acushnet farmland owner is interested in applying for federally funded farmland preservation. So that the ask is to identify a signatory. And that can be the Conservation Commission chair, the AgCom chair, pretty much anyone who represents the town's values with regard to agriculture or conservation or open space or small business, because after all, farming is a small business in our part of the world. Anyone who fits that description can serve as the signatory. So that's the ask. As of today, what this may be meaningless to you folks, but I'll offer it anyway. I've been doing this for a little more than 3 years, and there are now 89 towns in Massachusetts that have recognized farmland of local importance, and this is the map here. And the initial focus was in Western Massachusetts because there just happens to be a lot more farmland there. And in southeastern Massachusetts, there's generally not a lot of potential for farmland of local importance. I estimate that in Acushnet, there's maybe, probably no more than 200 or 250 acres that that would be recognized as farmland of local importance. So it's not a lot. I only say this because it's not a panacea when it comes to farmland preservation. But if it helps one farm landowner to have the choice, then I pursue it. So thus here I am pursuing it. I guess that's about it. Do you folks have any questions? Should I stop sharing, or should I leave this up for reference in case there's questions about it?
You can leave it up, Al. Anybody on the commission with questions, comments?
Just is would sawmilling be considered a farming?
A sawmill?
Yeah,
Uh,
because you're turning trees into lumber. Is that considered a?
It's not considered an agricultural endeavor under the definition of farmland of local importance, because it's got to be the soils have to be important for the production of a food, feed, forage, fiber, or oilseed crop. That said, if a parcel can have up to 66% woodland to be eligible, if the woodland contributes to the economic viability of the farm. So in a sense, it could contribute to eligibility, but in of itself, a sawmill is not considered farmland.
Okay. Forestry is that land under that?
Again, only to the point where if the woodland contributes to the agricultural viability or the economic viability of the parcel. The land has to have at least 33% cropland, essentially, land in farmland.
So can you put a house on farmland?
If you put you can put a house on farmland, sure, if it's not under an easement. If the landowner decides to accept money for a preservation easement or conservation easement, then no. The landowner is making the decision to have that land preserved.
So they pretty much can't do anything but farm on it.
They can't do anything to compromise the agricultural value, the agricultural potential. So that's what they're agreeing to do. They're being compensated for that by accepting the fair market value, development value of the land. And that's the landowner makes that decision. It's like, I want this land to be preserved into perpetuity. So this is the decision I'm making.
Okay. Sure, I missed a lot.
All good.
An alternative for solar farming then for people with,
That I don't know. I don't know how that's figured in. I mean, I would think that I don't know. I shouldn't speak to those details because I don't know
a
them.
lot of farmers are doing solar farms just because.
A lot. I see that a lot. I see a lot of viable agricultural land going into solar arrays. And I haven't taken the next step to look to see if any of them are under a conservation easement or an agricultural easement. I'm guessing not because and I don't know, I need to learn more about this because I don't know how permanent solar arrays are. I think some of them are just in place by gravity, right? I mean, they're on a big concrete block and they just sit there. Others are anchored into the ground with posts. And I don't know how reversible that is. But if it were to compromise the agricultural potential, I would think it would not be allowed.
No, I'm just saying it's a good alternative for farmers because they're trying to do something with their land. And if they had this available, I think it would be a different option than putting a solar field.
Yeah, there must be more land in solar arrays than hay because I see it all the time.
But yeah, so if they ended up making this decision, they only get paid once, or they get an annual payment.
I believe it's a lump sum.
Yeah, so there's probably
It's a
more.
one-time deal.
Is there anybody in the audience that has any questions, comments for Al?
Yeah, I have a question. This is Heidi Espinola from Park Drive.
Hi.
Hi. So the reason why I'm on this meeting is because of all the solar farms in Acushnet. And so if I had acres and acres of land
Yeah.
and I wanted to do this, and I don't, but I'm just trying to understand it. So I understand that my incentive to do this would be a payout.
Yep.
Who pays out this money to me? Who pays me this?
NRS, the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation
Okay.
Service, pays 50%
Okay.
of it to the partner entity.
Okay.
I don't know if you heard earlier on this. It's a partnership program where NRCS partners.
Okay.
It's usually Mass Department of Resources. So the partner pays
And
half and NRCS pays the other half.
And then does the owners of the land, does the town of Acushnet give any incentive for the farmland to be turned over into this, so nobody could put a solar farm on it?
I have no idea. I don't
Like, so I understand this. I grew up in this town, and the way it's turning is really scary. And I think some of these landowners who own so many acres, it's tough for them. If they can't do anything with it, they're sort of almost forced to sell to these solar farms. And to me, solar farms, I don't care if you want them on your roof, but once you take down all these trees, it's gone forever. It's totally gone. And then 20 years when the panels are no longer good, it's hazardous waste. And the other thing is, are these solar companies that's doing all this work going to be around in 20 years? I just think the town maybe too should also help these landowners, give them an incentive to not just sell because they need the money or they can't pay the taxes. I don't know. There's just too many solar farms in town. Way too many. And that's my concern. That's why I sit on a lot of these meetings.
Mm-hmm.
I have them coming right behind me.
Well, I can't speak for the town and what sort of incentives the town has. I mean, I do know about Chapter 61A, which is it's a tax break for farms, and there's a similar tax break for forestry. as well. That
So,
has,
so
that has,
so the
that has
town, maybe
nothing
the landowner could be with the NRC or whatever we're calling this. I'm sorry, I didn't get
I'm
the
sorry, it's
um,
NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation.
NRC. Okay. Maybe, I don't know. I'm all for it if farm owners want to do this, anything to stop solar farms.
Yeah, well, it's, you know,
So
again,
that's all I'm I have for the meeting. Thank you.
thank you.
Doesn't sound like this is really gonna compete with the solar though, because solar keeps continuously paying, and this is just one sum. And then, so if you farm it, there's no help either. You would have to go through NRCA to continue farming it, to have help farming.
Um, I'm not sure I understand the question. I mean, it's,
So if you deem it farmland, right?
or if,
Yeah.
well, I think the question you're asking, if the landowner decide, if we decide that these farmland of local importance soils exist, is that what you mean?
Maybe I'm the one misunderstood, but I'm saying, so if you do this,
I think
can you still?
I think what you're trying to say, Eric, right?
Yep.
If I'm the farm owner, I'm going to get a one-time payout. But if you put a solar farm, you're always getting money.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Pretty
there's
much.
more of an incentive for the
And-
farmer to sell out to a solar farm
And
versus
I would say unless the object is to preserve the land and keep it in the family and keep it the historic value of the farmland, this is the viable option. You know, that would be my take on it. I know I've talked to some farmers in town that, you know, they're a third or fourth generation family member working on the farm, and this would help them out. That's the way I looked at this, you know.
so now the way you said it, so what I'm getting, so now you sell it to what this agency or whatever, they pay you. Now you can still farm it, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the
So
entire, that's the whole point of it is
So
to
do you,
ensure
so,
that it stays in agriculture.
so would you have to apply for other assistance? Because we all know farming isn't very profitable. There's a lot of expenses, there's a lot of maintenance, there's a lot of upkeep. So what I'm getting at is, would the NRC ask, this doesn't void anything that would,
No, absolutely not. It doesn't change anything except that the land
oh, so it could,
is preserved for agriculture. It can still, the farm landowner is still eligible for all USDA program benefits and can appeal and can ask for technical assistance from NRCS as well. And there's all kinds of programs under the state's Mass Department of Ag Resources too that farmers can get assistance from.
can they down the road sell it? Can they sell it down the road if they decide to sell it?
They can sell it, but
Yep.
the preservation, the ag preservation stays with it. It's written into the deed.
Forever.
and they
Yes.
couldn't,
Forever.
they couldn't
Yeah.
buy that out either.
No, I've never heard of that ever happening. It's the current farm landowner makes that decision. It
Yeah.
stays. Yeah, it's forever, essentially, unless, there's a
Right.
Congress that changes things. And I don't see that happening.
So then even down the road, if like we were talking generation and generation, if a generation decided that they didn't want to try to maintain and keep up with their farm, but they don't have an out anymore, they just kind of stuck with.
Yep, that's the decision the family has to weigh.
So this is probably really good for someone who has probably no family type of thing because and they just
people
got a lot of money and yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly not for everybody.
And
I can tell you that well, I've been told there are about 1,000 parcels across the state that have been preserved under the state's agricultural preservation restriction program. That's the APR program. And about a third of those were funded with USDA NRCS funding. So some people do take advantage of this, or some people make the choice to see their land preserved, and others don't. It's up to the landowner, really.
So if the landowner decided to sell it, the new owner would know that, like, they don't own it? Is that
Well, they
that-
certainly, the new owner owns it, but
right?
the
But
owner
it stays in that,
cannot compromise
okay,
the agricultural capacity of the land.
okay. So
Yeah,
you
so they
could, in essence, pass it on when you pass away. You could, in essence, pass that land along to a daughter or a son. It's just going to stay in that status.
It's not, yes, they can't be.
Okay.
And a lot of times a landowner will not put the entire parcel into preservation. They'll reserve a couple of house lots for family members or what have you. That's up to the landowner to split
Yeah,
the
'cause
parcel up
afterwards-
however they want.
Yeah, because they couldn't put any buildings up or nothing after the fact.
Correct.
So they could, would they be able to put a barn, like if they wanted to do it?
Yeah, there's a lot. My understanding is that there's allowances for that sort of thing that contributes to the agricultural endeavor of the operation.
But you couldn't put a house.
No. You couldn't put in a house or a drive-in theater or a Walmart or whatever. That's the entire point, is the landowner of the program is the landowner makes that choice. It's like, okay, the landowner values the land as agriculture and open space more than other things, and makes that decision. And
So if a landowner does do that, does anybody on the committee know if the town, if their taxes go down?
my understanding is, I don't expect the Conservation Commission to be able to answer that question.
Well,
Unless,
maybe somebody has some
Well,
knowledge, that's all.
If it's farmland, if it's deemed farmland, they're already getting a tax break.
yeah, they're probably
Okay.
getting a lower tax rate under Chapter 61A, which is
Yeah, you get it's a much larger tax break, like a
Oh,
lot.
that's good.
my
That's good.
understanding is that certainly the designation or the recognition of these additional lands that are important for agriculture doesn't change any tax rate. And putting the land into an agricultural preservation does not change the tax rate. It doesn't, the landowner doesn't get a break for doing it. That's as far as I understand.
Well,
I mean, an individual town could certainly do that if it so chose, but
and if you deem the land farm,
yeah,
you would get tax breaks, but you have to. That's why I was asking about being able to farm it, and it's not just preserving the soil, because the only way to get the tax break is you have to show a certain amount of money coming in through that piece of parcel.
yeah, that's my understanding. Under Chapter 61A,
Yeah.
it's not very much. I hazard to guess how much it is. It's only, it's not, you don't have to show that you're making a lot.
No, it's $250, I believe, in that town.
Okay,
So as long as you show, like, you could sell $250 worth of hay,
right.
and as long as it's deemed farmland, you can get a significant tax break. Or you can even do
Yep.
eggs or whatever the case may be.
Yeah,
So I guess it does. I guess we could rephrase our past statement. So at the end, it does kind of pay throughout, like solar does, because now you're getting significant tax breaks.
yeah. Yeah, but a lot of farmers choose to allow solar arrays on hayfield. I see it all the time. So there must be
It's easier, no maintenance.
Yeah, you don't have to do it.
You lease the solar company your land, they take care of everything, they do everything. You
Yeah,
collect a check.
so it's obviously people are smart enough to run the numbers to see what is to their benefit, and they make that decision. The hope with this program is that people decide to receive a monetary value for a promise to keep the land in agriculture.
Yep. Bob Spooner, you have any questions, comments for Al while he's here?
No, we're all set.
Okay. Well, Alan told me he has another meeting to attend. I spoke with the chairman of the Agricultural Commission. Spoke with the chairman of the Select Board. They were both all for this. I like it. I'm all for it. Well, with that being said, I guess I'll do a formal vote. I'll entertain a motion to accept the designation of farmland of local importance.
Yeah, so moved, Brian.
Second,
There's a second from Heidi. Okay, roll call vote.
Heidi Pelletier.
Douglas Thomas.
Everett Filler, aye.
Christian D'Souza, aye.
Eric DeBarros abstained.
Ryan Resendes, that's an aye for me. Al, I'll gladly sign that for you.
Okay, great. I'll conduct the review of the soils and the land use in the town, and I'll have that document to you. I'll email it to you within a month.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time and your support, and thanks for the service to your town. I mean, it's people forget how much of a commitment it is to serve on a local board or commission. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Al.
Thank
All right,
you.
be well, folks.
You as well.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Well, I guess the only thing we have a regularly scheduled meeting. So that would be our next meeting. That's Wednesday, May 8th at 6 p.m. at the police station. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second. Also move.
Second,
All those in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Roll call vote.
Everett,
Christian D'Souza, aye.
Douglas Thomas, aye.
Heidi Pelletier, aye.
Everett, aye.
That was great.
And Ryan Resendes is an aye. All right, guys. Thank you.